Hello there, and welcome to Sketchbook Club. I see that we have a small number of people gathering. Hello, Cheryl. Cheryl may not be here because she is concerned that it's too early in the morning for her, but we'll see. Diana is here, I think. Robert, nice to see you again, Robert. Sarah, no, you're not too late. In fact, you are just on time. Jesus, hello. And who else? Yael and Sangso, nice to see you again from Korea. I hope it's not too late there for you. John and Annie. I'm glad that you're all joining me today. You know, the Sketchbook Club is something that I've been doing for a little while. This is episode, is it 27? Yes, I think it is. And what I do is I love sketchbooks. There's something about them that is very different to me than pictures hanging on the wall, or even pictures that I look at on my Instagram. There's some quality to a working document that an artist has carried around with them and worked on, sometimes at great length and sometimes quickly and spontaneously. The combination of drawings, writing, marginalia, experimentation. There's just so many things that go on in a sketchbook that don't really happen anywhere else. And so with each meeting of the club, we join together and we talk about a particular artist and sort of try to draw as much inspiration as we can from them. So let's see some other folks who are here. Barbara and Deborah, Marie, and Diana. So I'm glad that you're all here. I'm hoping that you are all technically up to speed. And Helen, you haven't missed anything yet, but Carol, Marina. So yeah, guys, just in general, you can always come here to the Sketchbook School news page whenever one of these deals is announced, club meetings announced, and right then and there, that's when it'll happen. You can also set a reminder to remind you. But without much further ado, let me just lubricate the mechanism and begin to talk about today's artist. Vin Ganapathy. Vin is somebody who I've known for a number of years. He lives here in New York, in Brooklyn, in fact. And he was born in India, or he comes from Indian American stock. I'm not sure if he was actually born in America. I think he might have been, actually. But anyway, he comes from, and clearly his name is Indian as well. But he has lived in New York for a long time, I think at least since going to college. And so I think a lot of people are very inspired by Vin. You may have seen his work on Sketchy. Sketchy is, for those of you who don't know, Sketchy is an app and a community, really, a community platform where people post photographs of themselves, and then other people come along and draw them, and then post the drawings that they did of themselves. So if you've never played with Sketchy, it's really fun. If you're ever sitting around thinking, oh boy, I wish I had something to draw, someone to draw, Sketchy is a great place to start, because there's lots of kind of interesting looking people and interesting photography. There's a lot of style to it, and it's a place to get feedback on your work. It's sort of like Instagram in that way. But Vin, from early on, people started noticing him and saying, boy, he's really exceptional. And Vin, he told me in a conversation that was part of a Sketchbook School class that we did a couple of years ago called, it's now called Storytelling, that he's a member of. And in it he talked about the kind of ups and downs of his creative career and his interest in drawing. It began when he was a little kid, when his older brother told him about a kid who he really admired at school, who drew amazingly well. And Vin just started to idolize this older kid. And that inspired him to start drawing. And eventually he went to art school, studied illustration, and came out of school, like a lot of people do, eager to get going, eager to start making stuff and making a career out of drawing. And found it, like again, many people, no matter how talented they are, found it rough going, found it difficult to make ends meet. And so he ultimately ended up taking a number of jobs. He worked at the famous art supply store called Pearl Paint. Then eventually he got a job in an office, and a job that really had nothing to do with creativity. And he slowly stopped drawing. I think that happens to a lot of people, right? You just kind of lose your way, lose your incentive, your impetus. And so it wasn't really, I think, until a few years of kind of wandering in the desert that he found his way back to drawing. And I think Sketchy was a crucial part of that, because it helped to motivate him to draw on a regular basis. And that was the key to finding his style again and to developing his technique further. And also developing an audience of people who would encourage him and encourage him to keep going and say, you know, you're really great. We love what you're doing. We want to see more. Keep drawing. And that's certainly been a thing at Sketchbook School too. I think there are a lot of people who have found similar kinds of incentives. It's a really important thing to find other people who support what you do. I don't think it's begging for attention. I think it's part of being an artist, is to feel like you're part of a community. So that was really important for him. Helen, I know that you're a big fan of Sketchy and that Sketchy has inspired you. I think Vin has also inspired you. I remember, this is Helen Lee Pepard saying, recently she said that when she watched that first demonstration that Vin did in the storytelling class, that it inspired her to start drawing people, and that she's drawn, I think, 1,000 people since then. And I'm sure Vin has drawn a similar number. So hopefully today will inspire you as well. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you a number of things around Vin's work. Vin has yet to publish his sketchbook. A lot of times in Sketchbook Club, we take people who are interesting artists and who have published their work and published their sketchbook so that we can all end up, actually buying a copy of the sketchbook. But in the case of Vin, he's done some commercial work for clients, but most of his work is done for himself. I think if you are aware of the Sketchbook Project, if you have never heard of it, definitely look it up. The Sketchbook Project is a place in Brooklyn where they have close to 20,000 sketchbooks that people have basically submitted, donated, and that sit on shelves there. And Vin has a number of them there. In fact, we once made a film where we went to the Sketchbook Project, and we went with Vin, and he went back and visited some of his old sketchbooks that were on the shelves. So anyway, so the thing I want to show you today is I want to take you through a couple of Vin's sketchbooks and talk a bit about them as we look at them. And then we're going to talk a bit about People Drawing People, which is this new course from Sketchbook School that Vin is one of the teachers in it. And I'm going to talk a bit about that, and then I'm going to give you a sneak peek. I'm going to give you a special free sample of what this class is going to be like, and you'll get to see one of the demonstrations of many that Vin does for this class. So, Diana, if you'd like to see the Sketchbook Project, I believe there are a couple of ways that you can do it. One is you can, if you can't get to Brooklyn, you can look online. I think that they have a lot of their sketchbooks available, scanned and online. And also they have like a food truck, but it doesn't sell food. It shows sketchbooks. And that food truck travels around America and stops in different communities. And then they bring out a whole bunch of sketchbooks and share them with people, and they pack them up and they drive somewhere else. So that is pretty cool. And they also sell special kinds of sketchbooks that you can't just submit any sketchbook to Sketchbook Project. It has to be this very particular kind that they sell, not very expensively. It's a decent sketchbook. And then when you submit it to them, it kind of fits on their shelving system and it looks like all the others. So anyway, let's have a look at this video of Vin. This is one of his sketchbooks. So I'm going to spend about 10 minutes showing you this sketchbook, and then we're going to spend about 10 more minutes talking about showing you his demonstration of how he draws. So let's have a look at this. So this is life drawing. Vin does a lot of life drawing, and these are 2-minute poses. This is a 5-minute pose drawn from the model. He goes to several different projects. I've been with him actually to drawing class like this, and he is, as you can see, really very good at that. This is probably a sketchy drawing. It's interesting, again, using a number of different kinds of pens. This could be a self-portrait. Not sure entirely. Again, this is drawn from a photo, hopefully, as is this. Vin draws quite a lot from photography, but as you'll see, and like this is probably drawn from life. It has that feeling. Again, a photograph he draws with a micron pen a lot of the time. He also uses an ink brush, basically a plastic handle that has ink in it and a brush nib. He does some illustration projects. This is probably something like that. Again, another drawing from a photograph. A lot of times he uses a limited color palette, so a lot of gray tones, of course, but then he'll also do spot color, usually using Tombow brush pens. You can see here where he just uses 1 or 2 colors. I love this drawing. I want to stop a second and have a look at this for a second. This, to me, is just so beautiful and elegant. And I love when he'll do these drawings of crowds. He talked to me recently about going to Tokyo and drawing, there's that famous intersection, I forget what the name of it is, but thousands of people cross at the light. And he sat there for hours and drew that scene, which was really amazing. I mean, he drew all of the people crossing the road, which is incredible. And that's one of the things that Vin teaches in People Drawing People is how do you draw people in motion? How do you draw people walking down the street? But just look at the composition, how elegant this drawing is. It's really, really fantastic. And it's just another page in his sketchbook. It could be like a beautiful print, but no. In Vin's world, this is just one page in his sketchbook. Again, like really limited tone. He's using like 3 or 4 of these Tombow brush pens. That's about it. And he'll also draw sometimes with a Lamy Safari fountain pen with ink in it that breaks down when you put water on it. So a lot of times you'll see these gray tones in his drawings. That comes from taking water and a wet brush. It's like, for instance, here you see that model to the left. This is again drawn from life. I'm almost certain it's drawn from life because that model on the left is actually the model that we used for him in People Drawing People. Another 10-minute pose. But you see these kind of gray, soft areas that you see in a lot of these drawings. Those are just the broken down fountain pen ink. There's Stan Lee. Let's have a look at this one for a second. Let me just pause it a second more. This is one of those drawings that immediately you look at it and you know that Vin did this. And there's a number of reasons. I think one of them is these big black areas, but also that delicate line work. So there's the line that draws the shirt, the incredible detail in the face, but then look at that inky hair, and there's like tendrils, lines coming off it. And then all those broken down gray tonal areas that are, again, wet ink that has been sort of turned into a wash. Here's another page drawn from life in the studio. Just empty bookshelves, but there's so much interesting energy in his drawings and his lines. The lines are so clean always with Vin. They're not geometric. They're not inhuman. Even this is drawn post-Thanksgiving Day, so this is again drawn from life. This is probably photographic. This hopefully was photographic. But look at this, like patches of color, just like that splotch of red, splotch of yellow, and then these other drawings of just regular people sitting around. The demonstration that he did in there's that guy, again minimal color, more of this strange bondage scene. This feels like an illustration project too, of just workers in aprons. But again, it's just so limited, so controlled. His color is. And this, I mean, this must be a drawing done out of a window, just looking out of a window, but look at the insane detail. I mean, he has drawn every window, and yet it doesn't feel like an architectural rendering, right? It feels alive, organic, and free. See this time and again, this limited tone of number of colors that he uses throughout. It's like 3 or 4 of these different pinks and grays. And again, some more fast sketches from life drawing. I love this with a different colored pen on top of it. 5 minutes, that's all it takes. But what's the key to the way Vin draws? Is he draws a lot. Let's have a look at another sketchbook. The Jawbreaker. That's beautiful. It's like an Egon Schiele. Again, another life drawing. Vin draws really quickly, so he has plenty of time to draw the model and then draw everybody else in the room at the same time. This is unusual. This is like a full-blown, full-color drawing. You don't see that very often from him. I wonder if that was done for a particular purpose. Another, again, you see every single person drawn as a character. Look at how simple, how few lines there are, but he's captured every single person in the crowd. They all look like individuals. And the model, he probably knocked the model out in 10 minutes and then spent the next hour drawing the crowd. That's a great thing about life drawing classes, is you have dozens of models and only one of them is getting paid. Because most people sit really still when they're drawing, so it's nice to draw them. But each chair is drawn perfectly, even the stuff underneath the stage. Just incredible eye for detail, and yet he doesn't get lost in the details, right? You still get that sense of the composition where the model, particularly by virtue of the color, stands out from that crowd, but there's plenty of time to look through everybody's work, everybody's faces. Doesn't do a lot of urban sketching, but the thing about Vin is you get the feeling that the guy can draw just about anything. He is amazing, Diana, you're right. I mean, the quality of his line, and what's amazing, and you'll see later on when we watch this demonstration, when you watch him draw, he has a lot of control, but you see basically what he's doing is he's drawing a shape, and then he's drawing the shape next to it, and then the shape next to it. So even a complex scene like this, it somehow seems doable. It somehow seems doable to end up with, okay, there's a lot of laundry here. So these are, again, must be illustration projects, how to stuff a turkey, or toilet paper. So you get the sense that you too can do it. You too can accomplish these kinds of drawings that he accomplishes. If you take the time and just draw one thing and then the thing next to it. For those of you who've seen the episode where I showed the work of James Jean, I feel like James Jean must be an inspiration for Vin, because there's something similar about their line quality and about their subject matter and their aesthetics. This again feels like a sketchy photograph. There's Vin. Vin's in the crowd, and he says James Jean is definitely an inspiration. Well, there you go. We don't have to wonder. He is. Vin, thanks for joining us, and thanks for doing all these drawings, because these are amazing and very inspiring. Everybody say hi, Vin. Tell Vin what you think of his drawings in his sketchbook. Vin, this looks like it might be one of those sketchbooks from the Sketchbook project, is it? It has such thin paper, and you can often see the drawings going right through them. Look at that. That's so interesting, the way he's layered all these drawings on top of each other. Again, this must be an illustration project. Some kind of cheesy businessman with a big mustache. So, wow, look at that. So this is much looser feeling than a lot of his life drawing stuff. I love those lines that indicate the tone. Half drawn, but still so much energy and completeness somehow in the gestures, and this layering of drawing upon drawing upon drawing. You know, when you have a 1 minute pose, sometimes you don't want to waste a bunch of paper, so you just keep drawing on top of it, and then take some more time with this. That's the longer pose, obviously. So there you have it. That was pretty cool, right? Yes, so it's cool that Vin is here watching us. I would bring him on, but I think his work speaks for himself. So what I want to show you next is I want to show you, first of all, I'm going to tell you about People Drawing People, which is this new class that we're starting in a couple weeks. And what's interesting is Vin has a particular style of drawing people, and so do a lot of other artists. I mean, basically, so do all artists. Everybody has their way of doing it. And what we wanted to do with this class was to compare and contrast it. I'm calling it a master class for everyone. So it's a master class in the sense that we have all these great masters coming together, but master class can often feel like an intimidating thing, like, oh God, I'm not a master, I'm not good enough. But so what we did is we took Vin and a bunch of other people, Carlos, who you saw last week, Felix, and France, and Jason, and Kosha, and me, and we all tackled a single people drawing problem each week of the class. So the first week, it's just drawing the basics, like how do you draw a figure? How do you draw a person standing there? How do you capture the proportions? How do you make sure you get the whole picture and the person on the page? How do you draw shoes? All the different things that go into that. So we spent a week doing that. We said, okay, let's look at all the different ways that these different artists attack the same problem. And we made really in-depth videos, demo videos about each one. And then each week we also have a conversation with somebody. So one week we sat with Vin. I sat with him for about half an hour. We just talked about drawing people, his favorite materials, the problems he have, the difficulties that people have with drawing people, like what kinds of things he likes to do. A really in-depth conversation. And then each week, Kosha and I sit and we look at all the drawings that were done and all the techniques and approaches that people have, and we discuss them. It's kind of like when you watch a football game or something like that, and then they do the kind of post-game analysis. That's what we do each week. So the first week, we do just drawing the figure, and then the next week, we draw people in motion, right, which is really difficult for a lot of people to deal with. You know, you're sitting out in a cafe and somebody is talking and moving their hands around. It's one thing to draw a life model in a class, right? Who's just standing there and not moving. But how do you draw somebody walking down the street? In Vin's case, the assignment we gave him, we had a model walking back and forth across the room, talking on a phone. She never stopped, and yet he did 2 beautiful drawings of her. And then the next week, we talked about foreshortening. So that means drawing a person in perspective. So what do you do if somebody's like lying down and their head is near you, but their feet are stretched away? Like, how do you do that? Or do you need to have a ruler? Do you need to know lots of rules about perspective? Well, we got, again, a bunch of different artists, and they each tackled that and told us how do they do it. and Vin's drawing was particularly beautiful and amazing. But also, as you watch him do it, you understand the process, you understand what he's thinking, so you can do it yourself. And then we did a week of portraits. How do you capture a likeness? How important is it that the picture of the person look exactly like the person? Does it have to be like a photo, or why not just take a photo? What do you need to capture? What are the most important parts of drawing a portrait? And also, how do you draw a portrait from a real person? Going to sketchy is one thing, where basically you're doing a drawing of a photograph, but how do you do a drawing of a real person in front of you, talking, moving, breathing, three-dimensional character? How do you turn that into a beautiful drawing? And then the final week we did self-portraits, which is something that Vin has done a number of. Some of the artists had hardly ever drawn self-portraits, which was surprising to me because I like to draw self-portraits. But anyway, so there's lots of different examples. And so let me show you, I just want to show you the kind of overview of this course. It'll take about a minute. And then I'm going to show you, for the first time ever, you guys are going to get a chance to get a feeling of what just one video of the many that you will see each week would be like of Vin. So. All right, so that'll give you a little bit of a sense of it. As you can see, we're doing things a bit differently from a normal sketchbook school class. This is not the standard way we approach things. Normally we go to an artist's studio, we hang out with them, we go through all their work, we talk about materials. This is really much more focused. And also, this is a whole bunch of artists each week. And we put them in this white environment. And part of the reason for that is I've always thought it would be interesting to be able to see what the artist is drawing while they're drawing it, right? That's so often the problem. It's like, okay, they're drawing, that's great, but like, what are they looking at? What are they seeing? How does that line up? Well, with this technique that we've developed for this, you get to see the artist, you get to see the drawing, you get to see the subject, you get to see it from different angles, so you can really follow it in real time while the artist is talking about what they're doing. So you're inside their mind. And generally, we gave 10-minute drawing assignments, so it wouldn't take hours and hours. I'm sure Vin can do a drawing of a person in 1 minute or an hour, but we limited it into this short window just so that we could really understand it. So I want to show you a kind of compacted version of one of the videos that we're going to show. This is actually from the 4th week. And as you'll see, it's like an explanation. I'm sort of narrating and talking a bit about Vin, which is not what we always did, but this is the version that I want to show you. And you'll see like his process, you'll hear what he's thinking about, and you'll see the whole thing. So this, again, first time we're ever doing this, showing you an actual sample of the course. And, you know, if you're interested in it, this course begins in a couple weeks. You can sign up for it today and start to get involved with it. But it is, it's priced a bit differently than our regular classes, but we've also just implemented a payment plan. So if you wanted to pay for it over several months, if your budget doesn't allow you to plunge right in the next couple of weeks, you can do that. You will, of course, have lifetime access to all these videos. You can go back and study them, and that's what we want you to do. There's so much stuff in this course, including videos of models moving and going through poses so that you can put them on your computer. If you don't have anybody to draw, for instance, you're at home alone, there's nobody there, we give you people to draw, and you can stop and start the videos and study how the movement's happening if you want to. There's all kinds of things that will just, I think, be part of your toolbox of learning. The idea for this class really is draw. Lots of people, draw lots of them each week, and try the different techniques of each artist. I mean, to me, the ideal thing would be to say, I'm going to do a bunch of drawings like Felix, then I'm going to do a bunch of drawings like Vin and Carlos and so forth, and see what works for you. What are the techniques that they use that you can incorporate into yours? So lots of different options, lots of different ways of doing it. But all right, without further ado, let's check out, I think this is from week 4. I think it's like the 6th video or something like that, of this case, of Vin drawing a portrait of a friend of his in our studio. Here we go. Vin Ganapathy begins a portrait by carefully studying his subject. And when he feels ready, he draws the first line. Vin spends as much time looking at his subject as he does looking down at his drawing.
I don't do the traditional way of drawing, of creating an oval first. She has a very square-looking face, so I started with her jaw.
His lines are confident, never too scratchy or sketchy, never too bold, just elegant and right. He looks for landmarks and begins to define the edges of the face, which he'll use to guide his proportions and to place the features inside them.
All of these things around her face are basically a frame.
He begins to build up her hair using a water-soluble brush pen.
The hair is the funnest part, especially in a portrait.
Sometimes he'll draw individual hairs, but generally he's looking for large shapes that pull together the face. Now he uses a micron pen, which is waterproof. It won't be affected when he uses his water brush to add tone and break down the water-soluble brush pen ink. Accessories like her beautiful dangling earrings become another way to establish landmarks and to further define the frame that will go around her features. When he feels like he understands her jawline and the shape of her head, he decides how he's going to place the mouth and the chin. He uses a very light touch to place her nose. Next, he begins to draw the eye region, but first he defines the eyebrows.
Eyebrows are pretty fun to draw too, because you can do light starting points, and there's always seems to be a thick part right here, and then it usually goes light again.
Now he knows how to place the eyes. He looks at the shape of the negative space below the eyebrow and below the eyelid. He places the second eye, again carefully drawing the shape of the top of the eyelid first. Vin never draws what he thinks is there, but only what he can actually see himself. He goes back and forth between studying his subject and doing minor revisions and alterations to the exact shape of the eyelids. Then he adds tone to the irises, which brings them alive. His water brush activates the ink from the brush pen, and a paper towel helps to blend it.
Instead of using a line to or her eyelids, I'll usually use like a wash brush to pull out some of the ink, create like the rest of the nose, or like the shadow that's in her eyes or her eyelids.
Now he comes back with his fine micron pen to add the final touches and details. And then he comes back with his water brush, adding subtle areas of tone that he blots out time and again to make sure that nothing stands out too strongly. That's the key to Vin Ganapathy's work. Careful, deliberate observation so that he gets every line right where it should be, and then the slow and subtle layering of tone to achieve dimension and accuracy and drawings that look alive.
I am finishing up with a large brush pen because, again, with the hair, I really like using large swabs of ink. I usually do this with the hair. I think this is finished for a black and white portrait.
And there it is. In 10 minutes, the portrait's done, and the likeness is stunning. There you have it. A little tiny morsel of what people drawing people is like. I mean, to me, that demonstration, like, you get to see a lot of these techniques that he uses. The diluting of the water-soluble ink, and the way that he uses that ink brush to create those big black areas. But also, you see how he builds up the whole drawing through the frame and so forth. So it's really an opportunity, I think, to think like he does, to understand. So often we look at a finished drawing and we don't really understand how it got to be that. But this demonstration and all these demonstrations you get to see, and you get to see also what do artists have in common. Like, there's certain drawing problems that they solve in similar ways, and yet there may be massive deviations and completely different approaches. And it's just so interesting to see them, and then to think, what do I feel most comfortable with? What are the results I want to accomplish by looking at a bunch of different ones? Because there isn't one. I mean, some people want to draw like Vin, but not everybody does. And so what can you take from him, and how can you learn that and apply it? So I think in 5 weeks, this course will significantly change the way you draw for the better. It will take away a lot of the kind of anxiety you might have around drawing people. We talk a lot about, like, how do you achieve a likeness? Why does that matter? How do you do a good drawing that doesn't look like the person you're drawing, and how could it still be good? What are the steps you take when you're drawing somebody in motion? How do you capture that? What should you be thinking about? How do you find the proportions to get a person so suddenly they don't have like a giant head or little thin arms? How do you get all that? How do you deal with convoluted poses where a person isn't just standing in it like a soldier, but is distorted in some way? How do you approach that? These are all really important questions, and drawing people is in some ways like drawing other things, drawing buildings or animals or teacups. But in some ways, because of the way our brains are designed to think about other people, right? We have this ability to recognize faces with such specificity, right? You can look at the face of a person you haven't seen in 20 years walking down the street in a crowd and instantly recognize them. That's because of the certain way that our brain works when it comes to analyzing faces. So the way that we do drawings and the way that we assess them when they're of people can be really different, even though the actual process of drawing them is the same. But you can get away with doing a drawing of a building and not putting in the correct number of windows or making it wonky and bend to the side. But when it comes to drawing a person, you feel much less comfortable taking those liberties. But at other times, you might decide, I'm going to exaggerate some aspect of them. Felix Scheinberg is a great example of that, of taking people and not necessarily like giving them a big nose if they have a slightly large nose, but of just somehow breaking down them into essentials that capture exactly who they are, but doesn't necessarily look photographically. What you see that we do with this technique of these layers on the white backgrounds is you got to see it with Vin's thing where we can actually perfectly line up a drawing with the subject. And so you can see where did he perfectly capture it. I mean, there are times when it can look like the artist is drawing, like tracing the air and capturing it perfectly. And then there are other times where they take big deviations and yet it somehow captures the essence of the person. So these are all things I think it's a really different course than you might be used to when you see people drawing classes where they sort of say, okay, let's draw an egg and let's cut it in half and then let's cut that in half again. And then, first make sure you draw the ears, whatever the sequence of steps are that a lot of times drawing teachers take. What we're trying to do here is we're trying to say, what are the kind of thinking that you should do? What are the things that you should consider? Yes, step by step, but sometimes the steps can be inverted and sometimes you can leave out half the steps and invent other ones. There isn't necessarily a defined process, but there are ways of asking yourself questions and approaching things. That's sort of the Sketchbook School way of teaching, is not by just, giving you 7 steps to go through, but really helping you to achieve your own form of art. Particularly if you've never drawn before, in some ways you're lucky you didn't learn a bunch of bad habits, but you begin certainly by feeling intimidated and saying, oh boy, I can't draw people, I can barely draw a stick figure. But how do you get to the point where you feel comfortable drawing somebody and it looks close enough for government work, So anyway, so those are all things to think about. And, Vin is going to be showing up and doing a webinar with us to talk about his teaching and his demonstrations and his style, so we can all ask him personal questions. And this class starts in a couple weeks, but you can sign up today and you can pay in full or pay in part, or you have to pay in some form, I'm afraid. But today you didn't have to, and you got to see Vin's work. So anyway, I'll be back hopefully next week with another edition, another chapter in the Sketchbook Club library. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any other questions, you can always email me, or you can send me a comment through Facebook, whatever you want. Is it a community class or do as you will? Well, you can always do as you will. But this is a community class in the sense that we're all going to be beginning on the day that the class comes out, but you will, of course, have lifetime access to this, so you can come and work on it as you want to. If for some reason you're busy during a couple of weeks of class and you want to come back later on, it's entirely up to you. You have that freedom. As far as I'm concerned, if you want to get more out of this class, start today. Sign up today, certainly, but start drawing people today. Even if the class hasn't begun, the way to get better at drawing is to draw. So I would say start drawing and draw from now on, but make sure that that you show up and watch these videos. There's a lot to watch, and a lot of them are designed to be watched a number of times. You might want to study them. You might want to pause them. You might want to take notes. We give you notes, of course, at the beginning of each one. Let's see, they're all subtitled, so you can turn off the volume if you want and just listen to them on your phone. But there's all kinds of different options. So will there be weekly web sessions? Well, there will be a weekly webinar. So during the course of the course, each week we will have probably an hour where Kosha and I and one of the other artists in the class will join just like this. We'll do it on a special platform, and we will answer your questions, and we'll talk about the week. And then each week you'll get to do that. If you don't take the class live, if you don't take it in sequence with us when we launch it, the webinars will be recorded and you can watch them when you want to. But if you do join us, then you can ask your questions. Another exciting thing about this is we are about to launch an alternative to Facebook for the Sketchbook School community. And if you sign up for People Drawing People, you will be in the very first group of people who are invited to join us on this new platform called the Schoolyard. We're just announcing it now, basically, and we will be letting people in the next couple weeks, and it's going to blow Facebook away. You will love it. It's an amazing way to share with other students in the community. It's fun, it's great looking, and it's all about Sketchbook School. So stay tuned for that. If you sign up for People Drawing People, you will be in. And if you don't, well, one day you will be. Eventually we will invite other people to be in. But I would say join us now. Does the webinar come with a class? How do you get to it? You will be told. We will send you a link. We will also put it in the class. You will be able to get to it. You will get an invitation. It usually happens at noon on Fridays, noon Eastern Standard Time on Fridays. If you can't make it then, you will get not only an invitation but a reminder. But then also, if you can't get to it, it will be recorded. It will be available in your class. You can watch it back at your leisure. You just won't be able to ask live questions. So, all right, good. I think I've gotten all of your questions. Katrina, don't apologize. This may be a new thing for you, in which case we welcome you. And let's see. So anyway, Vin Ganapathy, Felix Scheinberger, France, and Jason Doss, and who am I leaving out? Oh, Carlos Aponte, who you saw last week, me and Kosha every week, drawing, talking about drawing, all kinds of cool stuff. I think you're really going to enjoy it. I can't tell you, this is the 25th class we've made. I learned so much while making this class. And I know that you'll learn even more by taking it, because there's just so many interesting things that you learn by comparing and contrasting different people's approaches. I've never seen anything like it. That's why we made it. And I've never seen anything like this kind of filmic technique that we use to juxtapose the different kind of angles on the drawing event. So the way to think about this is it's partly like this sort of David Attenborough study of the artist in his milieu. It's partly like watching a football game and getting the play-by-play analysis afterwards. It's also partly a chat show where we do these in-depth interviews with people. It's also an opportunity for you to do work, engage in questions and discussions with other people. I mean, it's not just an online drawing course. It's a really cool event that I think you're really going to enjoy. So anyway, enough from me. I'll see you next week. Thanks for joining me in this week's Sketchbook Club. Ta-da, or toodaloo, or bye-bye, or ciao.